Welcome, fitness enthusiasts and ultimate Frisbee aficionados, to the TOBU Fitness Podcast, your guide to elevating your game and mastering the art of ultimate Frisbee through the lens of strength and conditioning. Whether you're a seasoned player or just stepping onto the field for the first time, this podcast is your one-stop destination for unlocking your true potential. This is the TOBU Fitness Podcast with your host, certified strength and conditioning coach, Justin Shelby.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the TOBU Fitness Podcast. This is episode number 10. We've got a great guest with us tonight. This is Collin Hill. Collin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. Do you want to tell people about your background, a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I am currently a senior at Berry College. I've been playing Ultimate for about, I want to say 7 years now. And I have played for multiple club teams, including Atlanta Hooch, Atlanta Chain Lightning, and I played one game for the Atlanta Hustle in 2022.
Right on. One thing, I guess, about Collin for the listeners, and we'll talk about this a lot more, I think, a little bit later in the show. But like we just talked about before starting the recording, Collin was my first ever client specific for Ultimate Frisbee. So obviously, I've had clients before. I've worked with Ultimate players before. But when TOBU Fitness made that switch to Ultimate Frisbee, Collin was the first one to jump on it. And he's been kind of my first Ultimate Frisbee client. So there's a special connection we have because of that. And yeah, he's been working with me for close to a year now. Like, the work ethic, the motivation and stuff, it's really awesome to see, really crazy to see. So definitely sky's the limit for Collin. I know he's got a lot coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about training in a second. But yeah, first question, I want to ask you a little bit about what it's like to juggle all those seasons. Kind of a recurring theme I talk about with a lot of people is I feel like Ultimate players play too much Ultimate sometimes, and we don't have that dedicated off season. And part of that, I think, is because when you play club, when you play college, and when you play AUDL as well, it's you have no time to rest, right? So what's it like managing club and college, and then sometimes AUDL for you too?
I'd say it's a fun experience, but at the same time, it's a really draining experience because I'm having to manage my time between all of those club seasons, and then not to mention manage my time off the field. So when I leave a college practice, I am not even thinking about, now let me go chill and rest. I'm thinking about the next thing that I can do for whatever other club team or whatever other possibly pro team that I'm needing to improve myself on. So I'd say it's a fun experience because I get to play a lot of Ultimate, but at the same time, it is really hard to just go at 100% during the entire time as you're transitioning between the different levels of play.
Yeah. And have you found anything that's helped you maintain that balance?
I'd say having fun whenever I'm not playing Frisbee, as in I'm spending time with my loved ones, I'm going out and reading a good book, or honestly, I'm just enjoying other sports like basketball, honestly. Finding that thing besides Frisbee that you allow yourself to kind of have fun and enjoy helps me kind of go through the motions a little better.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that's so important. When you're trying to be so intense in something, you can only maintain that for so long. So being able to kind of disconnect a little bit to get yourself away from it, yeah, I think is super important. And I think there's some people that are special that can maintain that for a short period of time, right? Just obsess over Frisbee, but eventually that pace kind of falls off a little bit. So yeah, super, super good. I think that you've kind of recognized that from an early age. One thing that I also think is interesting is at Berry College, where you're at now, you're the captain, the top dog there, right? But then I know you've also kind of had to grind a little bit for spots on some higher level teams and hustle and stuff like that. What's that what's that like, in one setting being the top dog and then balancing that with kind of having to earn your spot in some other situations?
I guess I would say at Barry, I am pushing everyone else to be better. That way, I'm still holding myself accountable of not slacking off and just taking it easy. And then when I eventually transition to like higher levels like club and pro, I'm still pushing not only myself but everyone else to be better with my play.
So it's almost like shifting your focus a little bit, just depending on where you are.
Yes, in college, I'm more so focused on what can I do to make my teammates better while I'm still, maybe a level or two above where they're at currently, but what can I do to bring them up to my level? And then going to club, I'm focusing on how can I bring myself up to this person's level on this club team.
For sure. And I'm sure it sounds like that almost would like help out with that balance too, where it's like
Mm.
you can think about, your teammates a little bit in one setting, but then you also have time to focus on yourself a little bit too. So what advice would you have for other college captains who are in a similar situation where they're on their college team, everybody's a peer in a sense where, you have seniors versus freshmen, but at the end of the day, everybody's a college student. So it's like, we're all kind of on the same like playing field. Yet you have to kind of take on that leadership role and that captain role and help people improve. Like what are some things that you found have helped you improve the level of play of some of your teammates?
I guess I would say being able to teach others about ways they can get better at Frisbee honestly helps you get better at Frisbee and helps you understand the game a little bit more. I don't know what it is about it, but being able to teach someone something allows you to get better at that same thing. So I'd say honestly, just being able to teach others uh, about how they can improve on one thing, and that in turn eventually leads to you improving more on other things in ultimate.
I think teaching is one of the best ways to learn. And I think there's an Einstein quote that I go by, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like, if you can't explain something simply, then you don't know it well enough. And yeah, and it sounds like that's kind of what you got to do. It's like in order to be able to teach something, you've got to or you got to be able to explain it simply, but then you have to have this like really great understanding of kind of these concepts that you're teaching.
Mhm.
Do you have like a kind of like a framework or a progression that you've used to help teach some younger players?
At Barry, I say we like to go through the building blocks. The first building block is being able to throw. So we teach our rookies or whoever else how to throw in a way where they're not falling over, in a way where they're not picking up their foot, getting the fundamentals and basics down of throwing. And then once they have a good idea about how to throw, we then move on to cutting mechanics about how to cut downfield, how to set up your defender so you can get an easy under. And then we move on into more complicated stuff like positioning on defense, when to cut on offense, and stuff of that nature. So that's what I'd say. I'd say we start with throwing, then we move into cutting motions, and then after that, we pretty much play with other little things and frisbee and stuff like that.
And just out
Mhm.
of curiosity, like what what are like the big things you guys are focusing on now? Or is that like secret from the rivals?
Um, I guess the things that we're focusing on now, without giving too much away, is learning how to play with each other and play to each other's strengths. Being able to play as a team as opposed to relying on individuals to play their best, I think is a very important skill that allows teams to go from being good teams to being elite teams. So that's what I'd say we're focusing on now.
Nice. Nice.
Mhm.
And guess putting like your, taking your captain hat off and putting your player hat back on, when you were talking about surrounding yourself with some of these better players on these better teams and trying to get up to their level, walk me through that process. Like, what are you seeing? What are you thinking about? What are you actively trying to do?
I'm mostly figuring out what can I do to gain a step to where those players are. How can I guard this great offensive player better? How can I get more yards of separation on this good defender? Um, that's kind of my thought process whenever I'm around higher level players than me. I'm figuring out, okay, what can I do to make them be a little more uncomfortable, or what can I do to make more plays in spots where people are going to notice me.
I think it's awesome too, because I know like it takes a level of humility to be able to step down from being the top dog and intentionally put yourself in these situations around these better players. What advice do you have maybe for players that are trying to break in to that kind of like, maybe it's their local nationals level team. They're trying to go to tryouts and go to maybe some preseason stuff to get better and hopefully earn their spot. What advice do you have for players like that?
I'd say the first thing is to listen to the veterans. I think the veterans honestly see the most and know uh, everything that you are trying to accomplish. Now, I have this one vet that I always honestly listen to, and that is Trenton Spanks. He will tell me straight up what I honestly need to do better. And if that means, oh, you need to be a little more physical when you're playing defense, or I need to be more assertive when I'm about to go and cut downfield. So I'd say anyone who's looking to like try out for a really high level team is to listen to the people who have already been there and try and do whatever it is that they are saying in the huddles, saying in the lines of scrimmage, stuff like that.
Right on. Well, let's shift focus here a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about the mental game for you, because I know I feel like that's somewhere, at least from as long as I've known you, I feel like that's somewhere where you strive, is that mental toughness kind of. What I guess going into a big game where with Barry, let's say, like what are some things mentally that you do to stay focused?
One thing that I've adopted recently, thanks to Coach Miranda Knowles, is breathing technique. Um, I honestly like taking slow, deep breaths every time I start feeling nervous. And honestly, that is what calms me down. Taking those deep breaths, uh, visualizing what I'm about to do, and that honestly helps me focus. So deep breathing and being able to visualize what I want to do and how I want to do it.
Yeah, I think that power of visualization is really, really key. Are you like on the field, maybe like on the line before the pool visualizing, or is this like a process at home?
This is a process mostly at home. Um, Before I even get to the fields, I'm thinking, right as I get out of bed, I'm thinking about how I want to maybe catch the centering pass, how I want to play defense on the other team's best player and get a layout block. Um, so I'd say the process starts at home, and then once I get onto the field, I feel ready enough to go ball out.
That's awesome. Do you have any other advice then that you would add to that for players that feel like maybe they're lacking confidence or the nerves get to them a lot?
Have have the mind of a goldfish if you are to make a mistake. Once you start dwelling on that mistake, that's honestly when you will start making even more mistakes than you can ever realize. So I'd say if you make one mistake, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Just move on to the next play. Make your next play. the way you respond is more important than the way you, uh, I guess, react in that moment.
Love that. And I think something that I've kind of like admired about like, keeping up with the results from you and like watching your film and stuff like that is like you can tell you got that dog in you like while you're playing, but then off the field you're like the nicest guy. So like how do you kind of like shift into that, like go time mode? Like is that the visualization or is there something deeper with that too?
You can say that. It's it's honestly, I don't know. It's a mentality I've always had whenever I play sports. Whoever is across the line from me, I see them as a competitor, and I just want to do whatever it takes to win that matchup. Um, and then off the field, I guess I'm just a nice guy. Um, I just love to compete, and that's what I can honestly say about that dog mentality. I love to compete and push other people to be their best while they're pushing me to be at my best.
100%. Yeah, it's that. I feel like the common trait amongst like the greatest athletes, you look at it in any sport, is the competitiveness. They hate losing. It's like if you're so driven by competitiveness, like it's naturally going to carry you. You don't really have to do anything extra. It's just kind of who you are, right? I guess last thing specifically on kind of like the mental side of things, I think something unique about you as well is like there's been a couple times where there's almost been like a target put on your back in a sense, right? Like I remember we talked earlier in the college season about before one tournament, like there was an Ulti World article kind of like previewing the tournament, and they put something out, I think along the lines of like you are one of the best players, if not the best player at the tournament, which is a huge compliment, I'm sure. But like you said, like also a kind of a target on your back. How do you deal with the pressure and stuff that comes from that?
I guess playing my game, knowing what I am capable of doing when I'm capable of doing it, and going out and doing those things, as opposed to, oh, thinking of all of the people who know who I am and knowing that people have probably looked at film of me before playing against us. I just focus more on me as opposed to uh, other people having expectations for me. I have expectations for myself. So focusing on what I can control as opposed to like all of the attention that I might have on me at the time.
For sure. That's awesome. Narrowing that focus kind of on just the controllables in the situation.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's shift a little bit here too. Um, Obviously, you don't get to the place that you're at now without some sort of work behind it. And like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about the kind of the training side in the gym and what we've done. But even before we started working together, you have a separate Instagram account called That Dude Grinds. And I'm sure you didn't just randomly come up with that name. I'm sure there's some meaning behind it. Can you tell me kind of the origins of that?
I've always had to grind, I guess, for my spot. Like, I remember though when I first started playing Ultimate, I played for, I tried out for this really, really good YCC team in 2019. Shout out AT Aliens. And that team right now honestly have some of the best Ultimate players, young Ultimate players in the world. And I was at the bottom of that roster that time. And after we won the championship, well, co-champs that year, I wanted to do everything I could to be on the same level as those top guys. So after that season, I honestly worked my butt off. I was not a thrower. People used to call me Rondo whenever I would catch the disc on and under. And I've worked my butt off on being able to throw more than a 10-yard flick and a 10-yard backhand. So that's honestly where it comes from. I've always had to work for my spot. I've always had to work harder than others because I've not had the natural talent as some other people might. So hard work is what gets me to where I want to be.
100%.
Mhm.
What has that process been like for you then? Like you're saying improve, like getting your throws to the point that they're at now.
Mhm.
What was that like for you?
It was me honestly throwing maybe about 100 to maybe 200 throws a day, um, and doing sprints on the side along with that. It was just every single day I would focus on one throw and then I would get better at that one throw, one by one, day by day, week by week. And then eventually it led me to being able to throw better than I could when I first started playing. So that's what I'd say it's been like.
And
Mhm.
so you would pick one throw a day and then just rep it out 100 times essentially.
Yes.
Nice. What advice would you have for somebody that's maybe in a similar situation? Would you advise going down that process, or kind of reflecting on it now, do you have a different thought process?
I wouldn't say go by the process I went through at the time. I would say mix up the throws a little more, but at the same time, I would genuinely, if you want to get better at throwing, you have to go out and just get those reps. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or it doesn't matter if it's an hour. If you are intentional with what you want to get better at, then go out and do those things and take the time to go do those things. It's not going to happen if you, oh, maybe throw 5 minutes one day and then 3 days later you decide to go throw for an hour. If you are consistent with uh, the time and effort that you put into something, you are going to see results.
One of the most common questions that I get is how you can work on throwing by
Mhm,
yourself. It's
mhm.
easy when you have a partner, if you have a pod or a team or something, but what advice do you have for people that only have a solo throwing option?
Best thing is have a bunch of discs. And what I would used to do, I went to this uh, soccer field that would always have a field goal. Well, not a field goal, but just a goal, a soccer net, whatever. And I would aim to certain parts of the soccer net if I wanted to focus on a certain release point or if I wanted to throw into a certain space. So having a ton of discs, I have like 20 to 30 frisbees, and I just throw them into a soccer net, or even better, if you are able to access like a football field, being able to go out on that football field and just rip some full field hucks or just throws in general, that helps a lot.
Nice. So was most of your throwing solo then?
Yep, for the most part.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like that would be kind of reassuring to a lot of people too, where I know most of what's out there, I feel like people talk about like, needing a partner or needing a group, but yeah,
Mhm,
like if you got to where you're at
mhm,
going just mostly solo, like I think that's hopefully reassuring to people that are out there that don't have a access to a partner consistently. Another thing I think is super important, that I want to pick your brain on is film. Like,
mhm.
I think a lot of people know that they need to watch film. Um, and, we have great resources out there of like people that are currently breaking down film, to make it like more digestible. Like, shout out Hive Ultimate. But from your perspective, like when you're watching film, what are you looking for?
Hey guys, interjecting because Colin's audio cut out for a few seconds, but he says that he's typically looking for film where a really good player is doing something that he wants to focus on really well.
Good at the one thing that I want to focus on. So let's say it was like handler defense. One person that I know that is very good at handler defense is Saul Yannick, of Ring of Fire. He is really good at handler defense. And I will watch film from Ring of Fire and I would watch Saul Yannick every time he's on a D point and watch how he would position himself, how his footwork is looking every time a handler moves to a certain space. So I'd say picking out a player that does the thing very well that you're looking to get better at.
And I know Saul follows me and he likes and comments my stuff occasionally. He's been pretty supportive. So maybe he'll listen to this too. I don't know. So I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Um, But yeah, do you have any like kind of go-to games that have been like I wouldn't say monumental, but have like really kind of inspired you or shaped the way that you think about the game?
One of my favorite games, honestly, is the Ring of Fire versus Seattle Sockeye in 2019 at Club Nationals. That is one of my favorite games to watch because it was fun, and then not to mention there were a lot of great things happening near the disc and away from the disc. So I'd say that game, if anything, I've watched the most out of every other uh, footage I've ever watched.
Right on. And how often do you usually watch film, like on a weekly basis?
If I don't say 10 times, someone is going to come after me and say I'm lying. I at least watch some kind of film at least 10 times a week. And that's a bit much, maybe, but I enjoy it. And I honestly want to get the best as I can be, the best player I can be.
That's awesome. How much of that is your own film versus like external?
I don't really watch my own film because I feel like I know myself well enough. The only time I guess I'll watch my own film is if I'm not sure about what I'm doing and if it's beneficial to my team or not. So I'm mostly watching film of other games and stuff of that nature.
Just trying to learn more and expand the mental bag in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. Cool. Well, let's shift a little bit now. So we've talked about the skill side, right? Developing that, which you've grinded out the throws, right? Kind of developed the mental side and like the IQ side with a lot of the film study. Looking at like the athleticism side, like before kind of starting with me, like what was your process? I know you mentioned you did some sprints on the side, but what was like your training background like?
I I used to go to the gym a little bit, like maybe 2 to 3 times a week, but it wasn't like ultimate focused. It was more like, "Oh, you do some of this exercise, do some bicep curls, do some, bench press reps," or whatever. I would kind of do whatever on the side, and then I maybe would run a mile every other day. Um, so it wasn't much, but I did a little something to kind of help with my athleticism.
Nice. And then what is like, since we've started about a year ago, like what has training kind of been like from your perspective?
Training, from my perspective, has been like a process. So one day I will focus on lifting heavy, but at the same time being explosive. And then another day will be field work where I'm focusing on being springy, being quick, being fast, and intentional with my movements. And then another day will be focused on more of my body's mobility, health wise, being able to move better, being able to stretch a little more one way, and stuff of that nature. So it's a process. It's not like every day is the same thing. Every day is intentional and has its own meaning. That's what I say training is for me right now.
Nice. Yeah. And I don't want people to think that like this whole thing is just like to kind of push the TOBU Fitness like coaching and training. Like I know we've had some success with it, but I know it's also not realistic for everybody. So for people that are actively trying to get better, maybe they're new to the gym or they've been going to the gym, like what advice do you have for just people that are trying to better themselves?
Uh, I'd say staying consistent. Again, if you're doing something every week and you are doing that same thing, you are eventually going to get better at whatever you are hoping you get better at. So I'd say staying consistent. Try not to change the routine too much because if you change it so much, then your body takes longer to actually adapt and get better at whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I'd say staying consistent and staying like uh, with whatever program that you might have.
100%. Because I think what a lot of people end up doing is we kind of get in this like paralysis by analysis type thing where it's like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything. And it's like, that's probably the worst thing you could do, right? Like, it's good to at least start with something, and then, like you're saying, being consistent. So I really like that advice. Just to kind of wrap it up here, what's next for you, Collin? What's coming up, either this season or in the future?
I guess what's coming up is Barry making another run to be a better team than we were last year. Last year we finished, I think it was ninth. No, not ninth. It was 11th. It was 11th at nationals, and we want to build upon that. What that looks like depends on how we honestly shape up during the spring. Nothing is guaranteed. Everything is earned. So I'd say focusing on this last scholar season with Barry.
Do you guys have a specific goal, like where you want to place, or is it you get in the championship?
We're hoping to make a deep run in bracket play, whether that means making quarters, whether if that means making the jump from quarters to semis, or who knows, maybe we could be in the championship game. But we're shooting for the stars, and we're wanting to put in the work to do so. So yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, definitely good luck to you guys too.
Mm-hmm.
And I what I love too is like you jump straight to like your team, right? It's not like you didn't say anything about yourself. It was like it just shows like how dedicated you are to like the development of your team, and like probably how much pride you take in that program, which I think is awesome. Cool. Last question I got for you. I've only ever asked this one other time, but this is now like my favorite question. I'm going to end every podcast with this one. But I think I've asked a lot of questions, or you've answered a lot of questions, but I think it's good too to kind of leave the listeners with some questions to maybe kind of think about. Because I think that's what any good thought process is. It's like not about giving the answers. It's just about asking better questions, right? I want to know, what are the greatest minds questioning? Like what keeps LeBron James up at night just thinking about basketball, right? So what are the questions that Collin Hill is pondering at the moment?
I wouldn't say I'm one of the greatest minds, but I guess I'd say, how can I make myself a more impactful defender without having to go out and get those highlight reel blocks? If that's what I'd say, being a better defender. How can I be a more impactful defender without having to go out and get like a layout D or something like that? That's what I'd say.
Nice. Yeah, because I've definitely heard like defenders say this, where it's like if they're not actively getting Ds, or if they're not filling up the stat sheet, they don't feel useful. But there's definitely a use for defenders like that. So I think that's interesting. Have you had any thoughts on it, or is it just kind of been like a lingering question?
I mean, I think it's like defense is not just, I guess, being athletic and knowing where your guy is going to go. It's about what else is happening on the field. Where might this be going after X person gets it? It's more like an ongoing thought process of like, what can I do in specific moments and situations, as opposed to me locking down my matchup 1v1. How can I be a better defender for my team, not just for myself?
I think it ties back to like your thought process around like developing the team, and yeah, the kind of that captain mindset, which I think is really, really cool. Well, yeah, that's all the time we got for today. Collin, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Justin. It's been a blast.
You've been listening to the TOBU Fitness Podcast. Our passion is to be your guide in elevating your game and mastering the art of ultimate Frisbee through the lens of strength and conditioning. No hype, just substance. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Instagram and YouTube at TOBU Fitness. And to get info on one-on-one coaching and training programs, hit the website at tobufitness.com. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time on the TOBU Fitness Podcast.